Jun was a muscle-brained idiot who was too dense to notice that his tomboy bestie was in love with him, so he bro-zoned her. However, when she transformed into a hot baddie with titan-sized racks who wanted to practice some bedroom karate with him, he realized his feelings and clapped her disrespectfully. It all began when Tomo suddenly confessed her feelings to Jun. But surprisingly, the dumb idiot failed to clock the true meaning behind her words and casually told her he loved her too. This made Tomo realize that not only was he dense, but he also never saw her as anything other than his bro. The next day, on their way to school, Tomo felt awkward walking next to Jun. But the clueless guy didn't even notice her behavior and thoughtlessly clapped her cheeks. Since it wasn't the type of clapping Tomo hoped for, she felt slightly embarrassed and punched the fool in the side. Later at school, she complained to her bestie Misuzu, asking if a day would ever come when Jun would realize she's actually a girl. Misuzu coldly answered that she was reaping the seeds she sowed, reminding her that she'd acted like a guy ever since they were kids, playing games and getting into fights. However, she decided to help Tomo and advised her to try fixing the way she talked. Taking her advice, Tomo cornered Jun in the hallway later on and tried her best not to sound like an angry football coach while speaking to him. This prompted Jun to ask if she was practicing to become the next voice of Sir, which annoyed her, so she lashed out at him and they started quarreling. Without thinking, Jun grabbed Tomo's collar, exposing her milkers, and when she told him to let go, he refused, so she gifted him with a delicious knuckle sandwich. Later that day, when Tomo returned home from school, her father noticed that she looked battered, and when he asked why, she informed him that she'd gotten into a fight with Jun. Surprisingly, the man began rebuking and scolding her for losing to Jun, but Tomo refused to take his insults and clapped back. The following day, as Tomo and Jun walked to school, Jun apologized to Tomo for whooping her behind, but said it was her fault for forgetting her fist in his face. Tomo didn't respond, so he tried to get her attention by tickling her, but this only made her angrier and she punched him again. Soon, they stood by the zebra crossing waiting for the lights to change, so Jun became serious. He apologized again for what he did and pleaded with her not to ignore him, saying that his life was boring without her. This statement moved Tomo, so she cracked and accepted his apology, but soon regretted it when she realized he was still a clueless noob. Later that day, Tomo was on the rooftop with Misuzu during lunch, but the latter wasn't too happy with the arrangement and asked why she wasn't eating with Jun. Tomo replied that it was because she didn't want their classmates to get the wrong idea about her relationship with Jun. Misuzu knew she was dying to eat with Jun, so she decided to help her out and walked back to class, saying the three of them could eat together. When they arrived, Misuzu told Jun they were going to eat with him, and he agreed, which left Tomo worried because the two hated each other more than anything. Thankfully, they survived lunch, and while Jun was lazing around later in the day, a boy named Tanabe approached him. He wanted to know if Jun and Tomo had gone beyond first base, and Jun, being the dim-witted idiot that he was, misunderstood the guy and gave a response which made it seem like they went at it like bunnies. Misuzu overheard this conversation, so she went to tell Tomo that her empty-headed crush was telling people that they were bed buddies. Enraged, Tomo stormed off to give Jun a piece of her mind, and while she did that, Misuzu went to find Tanabe. She explained that Jun had misinterpreted his earlier question and made it clear that he saw Tomo as one of his bros. Later on, after school ended, Misuzu met Jun waiting at the entrance for Tomo to come with her umbrella since it was raining. Out of curiosity, Misuzu asked Jun why he hated her guts, and he answered that it was because whenever they got scolded as kids, she was always coincidentally missing, even though she was the reason they got into trouble. Unbothered, Misuzu asked Jun what he'd do if Tomo ever got booed up, and instead of responding, Jun pushed her into the rain. Following this, they ignored each other, and when Tomo arrived, she tried to leave with Misuzu, but the girl forced her to go with Jun. On the way, Tomo refused to stay close to Jun for fear that he'd smell the sweat on her since she's just come from practice. But Jun didn't mind. He started sniffing her like a dog and told her that she smelled nice, causing the girl to panic and run off like she was being chased. When he finally caught up with her, he scolded her for running off in the rain, but ran off himself when he noticed that her plot covers were visible under her soaked shirt. The following day, after karate practice, Tomo rushed after her sparring partner, Misaki, to speak with him. Unknown to her, Misaki's admirers were watching them and the girls became jealous, thinking she had a thing for him. The next day, while Jun was sitting at his desk, Misuzu approached him and informed him that Tomo had a guy friend from the karate club. Jun acted like he didn't care, but during their next class when Tomo moved her desk closer to his, he asked her about her new friend. Tomo confirmed that Misaki was her friend and even showed him a picture, but he mistook Misaki for a girl and relaxed. Later on, Ogawa and Mifune, the wannabe Jairus crushing on Misaki, approached Tomo and told her to meet them behind the gym after school. Believing that they were looking for smoke, Tomo assured them that she would bring the heat and the girls got scared. The fear only intensified when they returned to their class and learned that Tomo was a pro at karate and would send them both to the hospital. Meanwhile, Tomo told Misuzu about the two girls and how they were looking for a fight. But Misuzu explained to her muscle-brained friend that the girls were looking for a verbal fight and not a physical one. She advised her against going all Ripley on them, but Tomo still greeted them with a fighting stance when she met them later. The terrified girls managed to explain that they only came to her because they liked Misaki, and Tomo immediately switched up. She assumed they had come to her for advice on how to get closer to Misaki, so she excitedly told them that she would be their love guru as long as they became her friends. Days later, Jun and Tomo took the bus on their way home, and Tomo decided to stand because she felt awkward sitting so close to him. A few minutes later, Tomo felt herself getting groped by a cultured old fool whose hairline went as far back as the history of the pyramids. Her first thought was to go all Saitama on him, but she decided not to do so, as she didn't want Jun finding out. She did her best to ignore the ugly bridge troll using her buns as stress balls, but in the end, Jun noticed what was happening and lost it. Thankfully, he didn't rearrange the man's face and handed him over to the police to be punished by the law. As he and Tomo walked the rest of the way home, he suddenly stopped walking and told her it was time she stopped wearing short skirts. The next day at school, Tomo told Misuzu about the groping incident and what Jun said on the way home. It turned out that after he said what he said about her skirt, Tomo asked why, and he foolishly answered that it was because she looked like an ape playing dress-up. Enraged, she punched the living daylights out of him, as she told him that his head was a decorative piece. When she was done with her story, she complained about how dense Jun was, but Misuzu asked her to calm her melons. She then explained that he'd said that because he didn't want her to get groped again, which surprised her. As Tomo tried to come to terms with this new information, Misuzu asked why her skirt was shorter than a bee's lifespan. Tomo answered that she liked wearing short skirts because they were easy to move around in, so Misuzu suggested she take off her shorts. Of course, Tomo refused since she was worried about flashing people her goods, but Misuzu told her that it was normal for girls to wear short skirts without shorts. Using herself as an example, Misuzu pointed out that she was only wearing panties under her skirt, shocking Tomo. Later, after school, Misuzu met Jun in the hallway and told him that Tomo was waiting for him so they could go home. The boy became happy hearing that Tomo was no longer angry with him and rushed outside to meet her. To his surprise, when he found Tomo, she was only wearing her skirt, and his brain immediately shut down. Forcing himself not to stare at her legs, he started walking and asked her to join him. As they walked, Tomo wondered if she'd made the right decision by allowing Misuzu to convince her to take off her shorts. She felt so uncomfortable without them, but since Misuzu had assured her that it was for the sake of the plot, she tried to remain calm. To ease her mind, she apologized to Jun for hitting him, but the boy refused to speak and turned his head away from her. He continued walking that way until he ran into an electric pole, but still, he didn't say a word to the confused Tomo. When they got on the bus, Tomo casually commented on how crowded it was, but that just made Jun see all the males as potential predators. To stop them from looking at Tomo, he began acting like a guard dog and intimidated the guys with a menacing glare. After they got off the bus, he walked ahead of Tomo, still refusing to speak to her, which confused her. Tired of the silent treatment, Tomo grabbed Jun's arm to get his attention. However, the moment he turned, a light breeze blew her skirt up. Seeing her panties overloaded Jun's brain, so he fainted, leaving Tomo worried. A little while later, after he woke up, he apologized for his insensitive comment about her skirt and explained that he'd said it because seeing her dressed that way gave him a hard time. The next day, during gym class, Misuzu asked how things went, and Tomo told her it had gone horribly. She said she'd never dress like that again and complained about Jun's behavior, making Misuzu laugh. The next day, Tomo was walking the hallway, lost in thought, when Misaki, who was with Carol, the school's top baddie, called out to her. He asked why her head was in the clouds, but she ignored his question and asked why he was with Barbie's dumber twin. Misaki tried explaining their relationship, but Carol cut him off and said they were engaged, shocking Tomo. Misaki then asked the girls if they were friends since they were classmates, and Carol answered that she wasn't interested in the boys in her class because they were all NPCs. Annoyed, Tomo asked Carol if her eyes were for decoration since it was obvious she couldn't see that she was a girl. Misaki quickly tried to calm Tomo down, explaining that Carol meant no harm with what she'd said. Since it was Misaki begging her, Tomo relaxed, and as the two talked, Carol suddenly poked Tomo's cheek. For the rest of the day, Carol showed up wherever Tomo was and called her a dummy. Eventually, Misuzu asked what the deal was between them, so Tomo explained that they spoke for the first time that day after Misaki introduced them to each other. Misuzu quickly deduced why Carol was acting that way after Tomo told her that the girl was Misaki's fiancée, but Tomo was still too dumb to realize why. The next day, Carol went to meet Misuzu to ask about Tomo, saying she needed the information to defeat her. Upon hearing this, Misuzu decided to use Carol as a tool and told her that she knew someone who could help her more than she could. This person happened to be Jun, and when she met him, she told him she needed his help to defeat someone. Jun assumed she was talking about a physical fight, so he promised to train her after school and asked her to meet him then. After school, Carol and Jun left class together for their training, shocking Tomo. She asked Misuzu why the melon goddess was with Jun, but Misuzu refused to tell her and only hinted at the fact that something was going on between them. This made Tomo uneasy, and she was left feeling confused, so during karate practice, she mindlessly beat Misaki. Meanwhile, Jun was with Carol, and after a few failed attempts, he realized that the girl would never survive a training arc. The only thing she was good at was jumping rope, which made her oversized plots jiggle. Tomo showed up when Jun was showing Carol how to escape a chokehold, and immediately misunderstood the situation. When she began demanding answers from Jun, Carol recalled her conversation with Misuzu. It turned out that the scheming witch had hinted at the fact that Tomo liked Jun and told her that if she stuck by his side, she'd see the signs. Satisfied with her confirmation, Carol declared that she'd lost and told Tomo that she wasn't her rival anymore, which confused her. A little while later, she and Misuzu went to a cafe shop because Carol had promised to buy Misuzu some cake for helping her. While they were there, Carol asked Misuzu to be her friend because she had no friends, but Misuzu told her that if she wanted friends, she should ask Tomo. The next day, Carol approached Tomo and asked if they could be friends, and Tomo happily agreed, making Carol see her as an angel. Misuzu also agreed to be friends with Carol, but made it clear that she was doing it because Carol was loaded. Later, Tomo told Jun about her new friend, and somehow the conversation led to him revealing that he dated Misuzu in middle school, shocking Tomo. Feeling a bit betrayed, she took Misuzu to the rooftop and demanded to know why she had kept their relationship from her when she knew about her feelings for Jun. Misuzu calmly explained that at the time, she wasn't aware of Tomo's feelings and said she hadn't told her because the relationship lasted for only 3 days. According to her, Jun had asked her to be his girlfriend out of nowhere, and she said yes because she wanted to make his fan club jealous. However, the next day, she reached her limit because Jun made her ride a bike for 2 hours under the scorching sun just to look at the view from the top of a cliff. After the second day, she decided that she'd had enough and sought him out on the third day to end things. However, he beat her to it. That defining moment was the start of her villain arc, and all she felt for Jun after that was pure hatred. Curious, Tomo asked if she and Jun had kissed during those 3 days, and Misuzu answered that they hadn't. She said they only called each other by their first names and held hands while walking to and from school. After leaving Tomo, Misuzu met Jun, and he apologized for telling Tomo about their relationship, but she didn't care. Instead, she told him that she suddenly remembered that he'd avoided Tomo like she had the plague during their first year of middle school, pointing out that it was after they broke up that he went back to talking to Tomo as he normally did. Jun told her to stop trying to be Sherlock Holmes, confirming her suspicion that everything that happened wasn't a coincidence. The following day, Misaki called out to Tomo as she and Jun were walking into school, and when Jun saw him, he realized his mistake. After Tomo introduced the boys to each other, Jun decided to karate chop Misaki, earning himself a good scolding from Tomo. When she was finished, he apologized for his caveman behavior and shook Misaki's hand. However, he squeezed poor Misaki's hand and invited him to spar against him sometime. Immediately, Tomo realized he was threatening the poor boy, so she grabbed him by the neck and apologized on his behalf. While they were swapping shoes at their lockers later, Jun asked Tomo why she was in the boys' karate club. Tomo explained what happened and apologized for not telling him sooner, but Jun didn't hear that part as he was regretting his decision to train at her family dojo instead of the school's karate club. After school, Jun went to the bus stop alone since Tomo had plans with Misuzu and Carol, and to his surprise, Misaki was there. He didn't want to be in the same place as the perfect Prince Charming, but after he recalled Tomo's threats to skin him alive if he didn't smooth things over with Misaki, he decided to speak to him. He tried making small talk, but Misaki was terrified of him and tried to stand as far away from him as possible. When they got on the bus, they sat next to each other, and Misaki asked Jun why he didn't join the karate club. Jun answered that it was because he didn't want to get his behind whooped by Tomo. Surprised, Misaki told him that Tomo had said he was the one person she couldn't beat, so Jun explained why. He said if they were to face off in a match where they had to follow the rules, Tomo would win, but if they got into a fist fight, he could beat her. Hearing that he practiced gender equality when fighting Tomo, Misaki scolded him, saying it was wrong to hit girls. Jun explained that he didn't like hurting Tomo, but said that the girl always came at him with all she had, so he had to defend himself. As they continued talking, Misaki realized that Jun admired Tomo and felt a sense of kinship towards him since he also admired her. However, he quickly changed his mind when Jun threatened to deal with him if he told Tomo about the things he said. During the weekend, Tomo and Misuzu went to a cafe, and while they were talking, Misuzu suggested that Tomo ask Jun out on a date. She made it clear that they were only allowed to do things couples did during the date, causing Tomo to enter a crisis. The following week at school, Tomo summoned the courage and invited Jun to go out with her on their next day off. Surprisingly, he was happy she invited him out and excitedly asked where they were going. During the break period, Carol and Misuzu told Tomo that they would take her shopping since none of her clothes were appropriate for a date. After school, the trio went to the mall, and while Misuzu and Carol acted like they belonged there, Tomo looked like a confused boyfriend at a Chanel store. Eventually, they picked out an outfit for her, and after they left the store, she thanked them for helping her, promising to repay them somehow. The girls then told her that the only payment they wanted was a detailed report on everything that would happen during her date. On the day of the date, Tomo showed up in her new outfit, expecting Jun to compliment her, but the dumb idiot didn't even look at her outfit twice. They visited the batting cages and the bowling alley, but Tomo felt the need to switch things up, so she proposed that they go to a karaoke place and was surprised when he agreed. At the karaoke place, she asked why he'd agreed to come, and he said it was because she said she wanted to come there. He explained that when they were kids, he went along with her crazy ideas because he didn't want to look like a wimp. However, over time, he grew to like the things they did together and was always happy to do whatever she wanted. Hearing this made Tomo realize that Jun was more or less a closeted simp, and if she kept behaving awkwardly, their date would end badly. Immediately, she picked a song and started singing loudly. However, Jun waited until she finished before he started laughing at her for picking a children's song. At school the next day, Tomo told her friends about the date and said she had never been as embarrassed as she was at the karaoke. It turned out that Jun refused to sing, so she spent the rest of their time there singing children's songs, and Jun made a video of it. After hearing this, the girls went to Jun and asked him to show them the video, but Tomo suddenly showed up and started chasing them. Days later, Tanabe approached Misuzu on her way to school, but the girl had no idea who he was, even after he introduced himself to her. Later at school, Tanabe told Jun that what he wanted the most was to see Misuzu smile. Confused, Jun asked Tanabe if he was tripping because Misuzu smiled all the time. According to him, she smiled every time she talked to him, and as he described the smile he was used to, Tanabe imagined something else. After leaving Tanabe, Jun met Tomo and asked if she also thought that Misuzu smiled a lot. Tomo answered that she hadn't seen Misuzu smile a lot, but secretly, she wondered if Misuzu liked Jun. Meanwhile, Tanabe was in class trying to make Misuzu laugh, but the girl wasn't interested, and when he refused to quit, she taped his mouth. After leaving the classroom, Tanabe passed Carol in the hallway, and surprisingly, she also had tape on her mouth. Later on, Tanabe approached Misuzu outside their classroom and asked what he had to do to make her smile. This prompted her to ask if he liked her, and when he confirmed, she told him to stop being a wimp and approach her seriously. She promised to shoot him down with a smile, making the proud simp happy for some reason. Days later, Tomo was seated in class when two girls walked in, and as she observed the one behind hugging her friend, she told herself that she wanted to try doing that with a girlfriend. Misuzu, who was standing beside her, asked if she was finally having her awakening, but Tomo denied it and explained that she only wanted to try touching and playing with a female friend for once. She said that each time she attempted to be like that with someone, they acted strangely and started avoiding her. She then asked Misuzu if she could experiment with her since they had been friends since they were in diapers, but Misuzu turned her down and sent her to Carol. The girl happily offered to hug Tomo, and as they hugged, Tomo's hands roamed over Carol's body in ways you could only dream of doing to your crush. When she returned to class, she told Misuzu that hugging Carol had made her realize that she was built like a football player. Misuzu comforted her, saying Carol was a different species, seeing as the girl had more plot than brains. Keeping this at the back of her mind, Tomo left class, wondering what hugging other girls would feel like. The next moment, she went to hug an unsuspecting Mifune, and as the shocked girl panicked, Tomo told her that she felt soft for someone who was built like a stick. For the rest of the day, Carol hugged Tomo whenever she saw her, and for some reason, Misuzu seemed upset about it. The following day, Carol hugged Tomo at the gate, so Misuzu walked past them without saying a word. Confused, Tomo called out to her and was surprised by how she coldly turned to greet them. Jun, aka Captain Obvious, then pointed out that the Ice Queen was icier than usual, so the girls decided to observe her. Tomo tried figuring out why Misuzu was angry, and after she mentioned to Carol that Misuzu began acting that way after she told her she wanted more girly interactions, Carol deduced that she was the reason. She then went to class and hit her head on the table to show her sincerity as she apologized to Misuzu for bothering Tomo. Misuzu told her that the one at fault was the person who kept pestering Tomo for attention, and Carol commented on how childish the person was. Later, Misuzu met Tomo on the rooftop and apologized for acting like a jealous girlfriend before offering to hug her like she'd wanted. Immediately, Tomo pulled her towards herself, sandwiching her head between her pillowy plots and her arm. When Misuzu managed to free herself, she asked Tomo why she had never tried hugging Jun before. Tomo freaked out and answered that it would be a weird thing to do, prompting Misuzu to ask why. She reminded Tomo that Jun never hesitated to touch her or act like a stage 5 clinger towards her, so it wasn't a problem if she wanted to hug him. Having this in mind, Tomo approached Jun after school and casually hugged him from behind, but he pushed her away. Surprised, Tomo asked why he'd done that, and he told her that it was because bros don't get touchy with each other. His statement angered Tomo, and she pointed out that he touched her all the time, which he didn't deny. He said he was the only one allowed to touch her, so she punched his stupid face and told him she didn't belong to him. Later that week, Carol informed Tomo that she and Misuzu wouldn't have lunch with her, causing Tomo to complain. She said she didn't want to eat alone with Jun because people would get the wrong idea about them, but the girls didn't care. While eating, Jun expressed his joy at not having Misuzu around to ruin his lunch, but Tomo was more focused on their classmates, who were already talking about them. Meanwhile, Carol and Misuzu were on the rooftop, and Misuzu asked Carol what sort of advice she needed from her. Carol told her she'd understand soon, and the next moment, Misaki showed up, surprising Misuzu. Misaki was also surprised to see Misuzu because he'd assumed Carol had invited him to have lunch with her. However, after Misuzu introduced herself to him as Carol's friend, he grabbed her hand and thanked her for taking care of the airheaded girl. It didn't take time for Misuzu to deduce why Carol wanted her advice, because Misaki made it very clear that he'd put Carol in the sister zone. After he left, Misuzu commented on how Carol and Tomo were head over heels for clueless idiots. Carol then asked what she could do to get Misaki to see her as more than a sister, and Misuzu told her to start by getting her head out of the clouds. After lunch, the girls returned to class, and while they were talking to Tomo, Mifune and Ogawa came looking for her. Tomo excused herself to speak with them and learned that one of the delinquents at their school was pestering Ogawa. They said he'd asked Ogawa to meet him behind the gym after school, so Tomo promised to accompany them. After school, the girls met the so-called bad boy behind the gym, and Tomo acted as Ogawa's representative, telling him that her friend wanted nothing to do with an ugly chimpanzee like him. This cocky idiot told Tomo he had no business with her before turning his attention to Ogawa and telling her that he'd asked her out because she looked easy. The terrified girl begged him to leave her alone, but the idiot kept spewing hot garbage out of his mouth, so Tomo sent him flying with a kick, much to Mifune and Ogawa's horror. They told Tomo that her actions had put a giant target on her back, and Tomo told them she was prepared to face the consequences. Later, the delinquent gathered his friends and made plans with them to attack Tomo. Jun happened to overhear their conversations, so he beat them up. When Tomo finished her club activities later on, she met the boys outside and assumed they had come to fight her, but to her surprise, they knelt and apologized. As she walked home with Jun, she commented on their strange behavior, but he pretended not to know anything about it. Even when she asked why he had a bandage on his face, he claimed he'd gotten it from a fall, so she teased him for being clumsy. The next day, Carol invited Tomo and Misuzu to her house for a play date, so during the weekend, the girls followed the map she drew to get to her house. Upon arriving at the place, they were astonished by how large the property was and stood outside the gate, wondering just how loaded Carol's family was. They were still doing this when Carol's doppelganger approached them and asked who they were. The girls told her that they were Carol's friends, but the woman was skeptical about Tomo, as she mistook her to be a boy. However, when she noticed the outline of Tomo's milk factory, she had a change of heart and invited them in. As they walked towards the house, their tour guide asked them to stick close to her so they wouldn't get lost, but she warned that her sense of direction was as good as Zoro's. Eventually, they got to the house, and the girls watched as Carol and the woman hugged like they had been apart for ages. After hugging her mother, Carol hugged Tomo and attempted to hug Misuzu, but the low-budget Wednesday Addams refused to allow her. Carol then pointed out that they had similar hairstyles, so Misuzu immediately undid her braids since she didn't want to be twinning with the Malibu Barbie. After this, Carol took the girls to her room and showed Tomo her photo album, while Misuzu drank tea. Tomo asked Carol if she was a doll because she noticed she had bows and ribbons in all her photos, and Carol answered that she liked them. Just then, Misuzu excused herself to go to the bathroom, but as she walked there, she noticed Carol's mother was following her. Curious, she turned and asked the woman what she wanted, and the woman said she wanted to know if she was a bad girl since she'd been mean to Carol earlier. Being the mischievous brat that she was, Misuzu asked the woman what she'd do if she told her that she was hanging out with Carol because of her money. The woman laughed and called Misuzu cute after hearing this, making the girl feel like she'd lost a battle she wasn't aware of. Meanwhile, Carol suggested to Tomo that they play Othello, and Tomo happily agreed because she trusted in her skills. Unfortunately, Carol won after 5 minutes of playing, and Tomo realized that the girl had more going on upstairs than she thought. When Misuzu returned, Tomo insisted that she take her place and play against Carol because Misuzu was a pro at the game. 10 minutes later, Carol won again, and the girls were left wondering if Carol had been pretending to be as dumb as SpongeBob all this time. A few hours later, they bid farewell to the mother and daughter and left when the two started hugging each other. The following week, Tomo complained to Misuzu and Carol about their upcoming midterms, so Misuzu suggested that they have a study session at her place. Jun showed up just then and invited Tomo to study with him after school, but Misuzu told him that she had already offered to tutor Tomo. Jun tried arguing that he was the best option, but Misuzu proved he wasn't by bragging about how she'd placed first during their last exams. After school, the girls went to Misuzu's place as planned, and Tomo commented on how different everything looked since she hadn't been there in a while. Carol asked why that was, and she said she couldn't remember, which annoyed Misuzu, who had to remind the slow-brained idiot that it was because she kept breaking everything. Just then, Misuzu's mother returned home, and when she noticed Tomo's shoes at the entrance, she immediately assumed her cold-hearted daughter had finally nabbed herself a boyfriend. Her assumption changed when she walked into the living room and saw Tomo. When Carol introduced herself to the woman, her reaction made it clear that mother and daughter were two peas in a pod. Eventually, the girls got around to studying, and while doing that, Tomo came across a problem she couldn't solve. Misuzu was in the middle of explaining how to solve it when Carol suddenly blurted out the correct answer, surprising them. Tomo asked how she'd arrived at the answer, so she explained it, and as Misuzu listened, it dawned on her that Carol's brain functioned like a little kid's own. She told her that it didn't matter that her method worked because, in solving math problems, one had to follow the process as it was as important as the answer. Of course, Idiot 1 and Idiot 2 told her that the normal way was a hassle, but once Misuzu hit them with her icy glare and threatened them with a book, they started singing a different tune. A few hours later, Tomo thanked Misuzu for tutoring her and said that if she could keep up with her studies, she'd be able to go to the same university as her. Misuzu was surprised by this, but Tomo didn't notice and said she would follow her anywhere because they were besties. Not wanting to be left out, Carol asked if she could come with them, and Misuzu said she was allowed. Days later, the results of the midterms were posted, and Tomo screamed like a banshee when she saw that she placed 70th. Jun placed 54, Misuzu second, and Carol was surprisingly first, proving that she was truly a genius. Another day, Jun told Tomo that he'd bought a new game and invited her over to his place to play it after school. Tomo happily agreed to honor his invitation, but later, she began regretting her decision because she'd been so excited about the game that she hadn't heard Jun say she'd spend the night at his house. She tried to go and tell him that she couldn't come over to play the game, but her friends refused to allow her. Later, after school, Tomo told her mother she was going over to Jun's house, and the woman said she couldn't wait to see her grandbabies. Of course, Tomo assured her that she wouldn't be performing any baby-making activities and then went to tell her father that she was heading to Jun's. Unlike her mother, the man had an indifferent reaction, making Tomo wonder if the man had any parental instincts at all. When she got to Jun's house, she learned that his mother wasn't home and freaked out over the fact that they would be home alone. They then went to have dinner, and as they ate, Jun told Tomo she could reheat the bath water and use it when she wanted to take a bath. Immediately, this dirty-minded girl began imagining Jun in the tub, so she told him she'd take a shower instead of soaking in the bath. While she was in the shower, Jun tried to distract himself from picturing her in her birthday suit by slapping himself. When she walked into his room later and noticed handprints on his face, she tried to inspect them, but he refused to allow her to touch him. They soon got to playing the game, and after playing for a while, they started teasing each other and almost ended up between the sheets after a heated moment. However, Jun fought the temptation and ensured that his meat remained packaged, so they decided to go to sleep instead. Tomo wasn't sleepy, and as she lay down on Jun's bed while he was on a futon, he called out to her and said he'd had fun. He was in the middle of asking if they would have more days like that when he dozed off, so Tomo decided to act like a creep by going closer and watching him sleep. What she didn't expect was for the sleepy boy to pull her towards himself and cuddle her like his life depended on it. The following morning, when Jun woke up and discovered they had slept next to each other, his brain malfunctioned, and he ended up in a weird position. Tomo didn't think anything of it when she saw him, so she packed her things and headed home. Midway, while she was recapping the events of the previous night, it suddenly dawned on her that she'd woken up on the futon, and her cheeks changed colors like a chameleon. The following week at school, the two were awkward around each other, but Carol and Miss Yuzu were happy with the new development. A few weeks later, it was Tomo's birthday, and Jun gave her a pair of sunglasses as a gift, so she thanked him and began teasing him about how she was older than him. Later, at school, she showed off her new glasses to Misuzu, who asked if she was trying to cosplay the Men in Black. Tomo told her that she wasn't, and then started teasing her since she was also a few months older than Misuzu. Ignoring her playful antics, Misuzu gave Tomo her present, which she revealed was a reference book, much to Tomo's disappointment. Just then, Carol showed up and presented Tomo with a bar of gold, prompting her to ask if she'd robbed the Federal Reserve. Carol calmly stated that they had gold lying around at home, so she'd taken one. After hearing this, Misuzu connected with her inner Mr. Krabs and asked Carol if she'd be interested in putting her money to good use. Tomo tried to stop Carol from saying yes, as teaming up with Misuzu was like making a deal with the devil, but Misuzu pulled the girl close and whispered something in her ear. After that, she turned to Tomo and invited her to come to her house that weekend. Before Tomo could respond, Carol blurted out that they were going to give her a makeover, causing Misuzu to elbow her for being a blabbermouth. On Saturday, Tomo arrived at Misuzu's house and cautiously asked the girls what sort of makeover they had in mind for her. They told her they were going to transform her into a proper girl, and when they were finished playing dress up with her, they asked her to try acting like a girl. Tomo said she didn't know how to, so Misuzu advised her to try speaking politely instead of her usual thuggish way. Tomo tried doing this, and Carol commented on how cute she sounded, making her blush, but Misuzu told her that it was only the beginning. To Tomo's horror, they kicked her out of the house and told her to go to the convenience store and buy some ice cream. Having no choice, Tomo went to the store, and as luck would have it, she ran into Jun there. Thankfully, her outfit made her unrecognizable to him, so he continued reading the magazine he was holding. However, he couldn't shake the feeling that the baddie he saw was Tomo. After making her purchase, Tomo tried to yeet away from the store as fast as she could, but she tripped and fell, so Jun offered to help her up. He was so gentle with her that Tomo became flustered and didn't think before asking him to walk with her. It wasn't until they started walking that she realized she'd screwed up big time by asking him to walk with her. On the other hand, Jun couldn't help but compare her to the Tomo he knew, but in the end, he concluded that Tomo could never dress or act like that. They soon came across a group of children playing soccer, and as they watched them play, Tomo almost broke character. Thankfully, all she did was scream a few profanities, and when she realized this, she shut up. However, when she tried apologizing to Jun for acting unladylike, he told her he didn't like a girl with a dirty mouth. This made the delusional girl blush, as it was starting to seem like she had a chance with him. As they continued observing the kids, Jun noticed a boy and a girl who seemed close, so he asked Tomo what she thought their future would be like. She replied that they might end up together, so he told her that he also had a friend like that and admitted that things had been different between them lately. Surprised, Tomo asked how he wanted their relationship to be in the future, and he said he hadn't thought that far ahead because all he was concerned about for the time being was beating her. Tomo contemplated revealing her identity to him, but before she could decide, Jun pointed out that her ice cream had started melting. Seeing this was true, Tomo let out a shriek and then thanked Jun for helping her before rushing back to Misuzu's place. When she arrived, she met the girls planning a surprise party for her, so they all sat down to eat some cake. While they did that, Tomo told them about her encounter with Jun and admitted that she'd liked the way he behaved towards her. The next Monday, Jun met Tomo outside her house and suddenly grabbed her cheeks, freaking her out and earning himself a punch in the face for the 100th time. Surprisingly, he was happy that she punched him, and Tomo started wondering if he was one of those masochistic freaks. Later that week, while practicing for the upcoming ball tournament, Tomo played aggressively, scaring her teammates, so their teacher moved her to the boys' team. The boys were happy to have her on their team, but Tomo wasn't, as she couldn't believe her Superman strength had gotten out of hand again. On the day of the tournament, Tomo's team was unstoppable during the first 2 rounds, and they were sure they would be victorious in the final round. However, while Jun and Tomo were taking a break, a troubled Tanabe came to inform them that there was trouble. According to him, they were at a disadvantage because one of the players on the opposing team was built like King Kong. Surprisingly, Tomo and Jun didn't panic and even told him that they had been waiting for the day they got to face off against the guy. Before the final round began, Goma told Tomo that he had heard so much about her, but said he was more interested in Jun. He then proposed to Jun that if his team won, Jun would join the judo club since he wasn't in any club. Unfazed, Jun accepted his proposal, but seeing as his brain barely functioned properly, he couldn't come up with a counteroffer. When the match began, Tanabe was the first to be taken out because he was distracted by Misuzu. After 2 more players were taken out, Tomo angrily aimed at Goma, but he caught the ball easily and returned it with a more powerful throw. Jun quickly jumped in front of Tomo and got hit, so Tomo decided she was done playing fair and decided to treat the game like the tournament of power. She threw the ball at Goma again, but directed it to pass between his legs so that Jun could catch it. However, it was Tanabe who caught it. Taking advantage of everyone's shocked state, he threw the ball at the distracted Goma, winning the match for his team. After the award ceremony, Goma approached Jun and challenged him to a judo match, which Jun won. Goma wasn't satisfied with just 1 match, so they continued fighting for an extended period. In the end, Goma won more rounds than Jun, but he declared that he'd lost because Jun hadn't used karate to fight him. Jun disagreed with him and was about to leave when Goma called out to him, asking why he didn't join any clubs even though he was strong. Jun answered that his motivation was his desire to reach the same level as someone he admired. However, he admitted that he didn't know what to do anymore. Later, as Jun and Tomo walked home, they talked about his match against Goma, and he said if she'd been the one to fight Goma, she'd have won. Tomo argued that he was overestimating her, and as they continued talking, Jun realized that he wanted to be more like Tomo rather than become stronger than her. A few days later, while Jun was jogging, he stopped in front of the steps leading to a temple and recalled his conversation with Goma. As he began ascending the steps, his mind took a long trip down memory lane to 10 years ago when he first met Tomo. It was the day after his family moved to that city from Tokyo, and he'd been sitting in the backyard playing a video game. Suddenly, Tomo, believing she was Tarzan, jumped into their backyard and began talking animatedly to him. Eventually, she realized that Jun was paying more attention to his game, so she snatched it away and began playing with it. A couple of minutes later, the game broke in two and Jun angrily punched her in the face. Surprisingly, she got back up and told him that just one punch wasn't enough. She encouraged him to turn her into a punching bag, saying she deserved more than that for breaking his precious item. She said this so aggressively that the boy became scared and told her that he identified as the One Punch Man, so he didn't need to hit her again. After hearing this, Tomo calmed down, and the two introduced themselves to each other. Later that day, Tomo's father brought her back to Jun's house and forced her to formally apologize to Jun for breaking his gamepad. Jun found the man more intimidating than his daughter, but he pushed his fear aside and told him that he wasn't upset with Tomo. Despite this, Goro kept insisting that he accept the apology or retaliate until his wife showed up and handled the situation differently. After this eventful encounter, Jun found himself spending more time with the crackhead Tomo, even though he struggled to keep up with her. One day, Tomo introduced him to Misuzu, and the girl didn't try hiding the fact that she disliked him. Months later, while Jun was playing his game by the riverbank bank, two stupid-looking boys approached him and collected his game. When he met the girls later, Tomo asked why he had a band-aid on his face, and he answered that he'd fallen. Misuzu teased him for being a klutz, but Tomo deduced that he was lying, so that evening, she showed up with his game. She claimed she'd found it even though she had bruises all over, so Jun got angry and started scolding her for being reckless. It didn't take time for Tomo to turn on him, but he didn't try to fight her and said he'd never asked her to get his game back. Tomo said she'd done it because they were friends, but that did nothing to diffuse Jun's anger. Surprisingly, his anger wasn't directed at her, but at himself because he felt weak and inadequate compared to her. When he eventually calmed down, he gave her the game and promised he'd take it back when he was stronger than her. To achieve his goal, he enrolled in her father's dojo and started taking karate lessons from him. Back in the present, Jun reached the top of the temple stairs, and he asked himself if it had really been 10 years since he made that promise. At the same time, Tomo was home, playing Jun's video game, and after she won, she wondered when Jun would come for it, as she believed he was already stronger than her. Weeks later, the summer holiday began, so the crew decided to go to the beach to relax and enjoy the sun. After everyone changed into their swimsuits, Tomo refused to come out, as she felt embarrassed to be seen in a swimsuit. Jun tried to convince her to take off the hoodie she'd worn to cover her body, but when he unzipped it and saw her glorious melons on full display, he quickly zipped the hoodie back. Later on, while Tomo and Carol were playing in the water, Jun chose to sit beside Misuzu. Of course, she teased him for attempting to stop his tool from rising and falling like the tides because seeing Carol and Tomo in swimsuits made his mind wander. Just then, the oblivious Tomo came and dragged Jun to the water so he could play with her and Carol. When Carol got too comfortable with Jun, Tomo got jealous and hit them with water balls, so Carol went to sit beside Misuzu. As Tomo continued enjoying her time in the water, she was approached by an overtanned gooner, who tried to get handsy with her. Before Tomo could react, Jun came up out of the water and intervened, scaring the guy off. Tomo was pleased that he acted like her knight in shining armor, but became disappointed when he apologized for acting like a jealous boyfriend. He said he didn't want people to mistake them for a couple. However, when he went to save Carol from the numerous guys that had surrounded her, and they mistook him for her boyfriend, he didn't care. This annoyed Tomo, so she went to complain to Misuzu about what he'd done, and Misuzu advised her to stick to Jun's side if she wanted things to change. Taking her bestie's advice, Tomo bought some ice cream for herself and Jun and made sure to sit close to him. Jun struggled to keep his composure as Tomo sat beside him, and things got worse when she pulled him back to the water. He tried to understand why he was reacting to Tomo differently, but since he was a dullard, he couldn't figure it out. On their way home later, Misuzu noticed Jun was lost in thought, so she asked if there was a problem, to which he responded no. Given who she was, Misuzu deduced that Jun was starting to see Tomo as a girl, and he didn't know how to handle it. One night, the girls had a sleepover at Tomo's house, and they played the king's game where Carol was the king in the first round. She asked Tomo to imitate Misuzu, but Tomo couldn't do it, so Carol ended up doing it and making her laugh while Misuzu cringed. For the next round, Misuzu ended up as kind, and she instructed Tomo to attend the fireworks display with Jun alone, which surprised her. However, she agreed to do it and went over to Jun's house to invite him to attend the display with her. She had expected him to jump for joy at her invitation, but he surprised her by calmly agreeing to go with her. Later, as Jun lay in bed, he wondered why he was excited about the idea of watching fireworks alone with Tomo. Additionally, he recalled the day she confessed to him, but quickly pushed it aside, convincing himself that she hadn't been serious about it. Meanwhile, Tomo was also in bed thinking about Jun, recalling what happened at the beach and wondering why Jun had been acting differently recently. At the same time, Misuzu was lost in thought, wondering if her plot to make Tomo act more girly was backfiring. It turned out that she'd only encouraged Tomo to act more feminine because she wanted Tomo to spend more time doing girly stuff with her and not because she wanted her to get together with Jun. On the day of the fireworks display, Jun left home determined to find out why he was beginning to see Tomo as a girl and not his bro. When he met her later, he was left speechless, as the tomboy was looking clappable dressed in a kimono. When they finally arrived at the festival grounds, they visited one of the stalls, and after the owner recognized them, he was shocked. He couldn't believe that Tomo, whom everyone at the summer festival had nicknamed the stall-destroying demon because of her craziness, could look so feminine and calm. After snapping a few photos of her, he called the other stall owners to warn them that Tomo was around. Elsewhere, Misaki, Carol, and Misuzu explore the festival together, but Misuzu was more or less an unwanted third wheel since she didn't have a date. Back at Tomo's side, she got separated from Jun and mistook a stranger for him, but when she tried to back away, he and his friends cornered her. Thinking she was alone, they tried to convince her to go somewhere with them so they could explore her treasure trove, but Jun showed up and whisked her away. As they walked away, Tomo thanked Jun for being her Superman, but he apologized for butting in when she could have handled the situation herself. In a fit of rage, Tomo hit him and said even though she was as strong as an Amazon, there were certain things she couldn't do. She then thanked him again, causing him to become flustered and almost embrace her. But he stopped at the last minute and suggested they go find a place to watch the display. As they head to find a spot, Tomo contemplates bringing up her feelings to Jun again, as she believes he now has feelings for her too. However, she chickens out at the last minute, convincing herself that it wasn't the right time as the display began. On the way home later, Jun reevaluated his relationship with Tomo and decided that he could never have a real punching match with her again. When school finally resumed, Tomo sat with Misuzu on the rooftop and confided in her about her worries. She said Jun had been acting differently with her, and she didn't know what to do or how to fix it. This left Misuzu to contemplate how Tomo and Jun's relationship had changed in the past few weeks. Later on, the pitiful excuse for a delinquent and his equally pitiful gang of failures decided they would take revenge on Tomo. When he spotted Misuzu, they moved to attack her since they knew she was friends with Tomo. Carol showed up just then, and when they tried to take Misuzu away, she used her taser on them. She then grabbed Misuzu, and they escaped to an abandoned factory. While hiding in the factory, Misuzu called Jun and asked him to come help them, but told him not to let Tomo find out. After Jun hung up the call with Misuzu, Tomo approached him, and when she noticed the bloodthirsty look on his face, she asked what the problem was. Unable to lie to her, Jun told her what was happening, so she insisted on going with him. Unknown to them, Misaki overheard their conversation and decided to go too since Carol was involved. Back at the factory, the girls were discovered by the bullies, but before they could harm them, Tomo and Jun arrived and started giving them a beating of a lifetime. Seeing that the bullies were being dealt with, Misaki went looking for Carol and Misuzu. When he found them, he was shocked to see Carol without clothes, and immediately assumed the bullies had tried to take her cherry. In a fit of rage, he attempted to confront the bullies and send their leader to Hades, but Tomo and Jun stopped him. The girls soon arrived, and after they explained that Carol had only been changing clothes, he became embarrassed, but still took Carol away. Misuzu chose to stay back and, after convincing Tomo and Jun to leave, she threatened the bullies by revealing that Tomo's father was the infamous nightmare, Aizawa. She then told them that if they didn't want the man to break all the bones in their bodies, they had to protect her, Tomo and Carol with their lives. The following day, as Tomo left for school, worried over the fact that her behavior the day before would make Jun stop seeing her as a girl. Just then, Jun approached her and touched her shoulder, making her feel excited and rush off, leaving him in confusion. Days later, Misaki, who felt like he was a pathetic weakling and a waste of space compared to Jun and Tomo, enrolled at Tomo's father's dojo. At first, Tomo's father assumed Misaki was just one of those pretty shouju boys. However, after staring into his eyes, he concluded that the boy was possessed by an upper moon demon and advised him to be careful. After this, Misaki was subjected to 2 difficult trainings, which left him feeling exhausted. Despite this, he was asked to fight against Jun, who got past and didn't go easy on him because he asked if Tomo would acknowledge him if he won. Still determined to prove himself to Tomo, Misaki threw a final punch at Jun, but Jun countered it, knocking him out instead. When Misaki woke up later, he was on Tomo's bed, and after Tomo explained how he'd gotten there, she asked if he wanted to become stronger so he could protect Carol. Embarrassed, Misaki confirmed that he was and explained that ever since they were kids, Carol had always found herself in trouble. He said he always did his best to help her, but he'd been shown over and over again that he was just as useless as the pink-haired girl who simped over Sasuke. Hearing him downgrade and belittle himself didn't sit right with Tomo, so she channeled her inner motivational speaker and convinced him that he wasn't useless. Unknown to them, Jun was eavesdropping on their conversation from outside. Another day, as Misaki and Carol walked to school, she commented on how Misaki had been giving off alpha energy lately, making him swell with pride. He revealed that he'd been training with Tomo's father, and said he was waiting for the day Tomo would acknowledge his strength. Hearing him talk about Tomo with so much admiration made Carol jealous. Later, she sought Jun out in class and asked him to hang out with her later. As soon as she left the classroom, Misuzu confronted her, asking what she was planning. Carol answered that it was none of her business, leaving Misuzu speechless, as she'd never expected Carol's response. Sometime later, Jun and Carol were together, and as they talked, Carol confided in him, saying she didn't think Tomo and Misuzu would still want to be friends with her. This was because she was mean to Misuzu, and was now doing something that Tomo would be offended by. Ignoring the part about his mortal enemy, Jun told Carol that Tomo wasn't the type of girl who abandoned her friends, assuring her that their friendship would be saved. Since Jun had hung out with her, Carol felt they were now friends and found a way into his room without his permission. When he asked her to leave, Carol refused, claiming that she'd come there to ride him like a rodeo. Before he could react, she kissed his cheek and pounced on him like a hungry tiger. Seeing his scared reaction to her, Carol told him that Tomo wouldn't come within an inch of his flagpole because girls liked someone with experience. Annoyed, Jun pushed her off and rushed over to Tomo's house, and hugged her the moment she opened the door. His action shocked Tomo, but just as he began explaining that he'd been hit by an unexpected attack, Carol popped up, scaring them. The Harley Quinn ripoff apologized for this and left after saying hello to Tomo. The following day, Carol apologized to Misuzu, who forgave her and asked how Misaki had reacted when she told him she'd hung out in Jun's room. Carol said he made a weird face, so the wannabe Cupid decided that it was time she brought the two of them together. When she saw Misaki later, she asked how he felt about Carol, and he told her that he saw her as his sister, but Misuzu called him a liar. Realizing that she could see through his facade, Misaki admitted that he was hopelessly in love with Carol. Satisfied with his answer, Misuzu promised to help him get with Carol. Her plan was simple: make Carol so emotionally distraught that Misaki would have no choice but to confess his feelings to her. When she returned to class, she convinced Carol that Misaki would never see her as anything more than a sister. Carol was so sad that she left, but Misuzu found Misaki and told him to go to her, so he rushed to her house. Upon getting there, he found her crying, so he apologized and revealed that Misuzu had lied to her, which surprised her. However, she asked what Misuzu's plan had to do with him, so he finally decided to come clean and confessed his feelings to her. Carol was happy about this, and after confessing that she also liked him, they attempted to tongue wrestle. However, her mother suddenly showed up, interrupting them. The next day, Carol showed up at school wearing a costume which scared the hell out of Misuzu, who believed she was still angry. However, she surprised her by kissing her cheek and thanking her. Weeks later, the school's annual marathon came around, and as expected, Jun and Tomo were hyped up about the race. Before the race began, Jun and Tomo made a bet that whoever lost would buy the winner a week's worth of juice. When the race began, the two took off running, feeling like they could outrun the Flash. As they ran, they began arguing about who would win, but shut up and returned their attention to the race when the PE teacher passed them on a scooter. Soon they arrived at the turning point for the girls, but Tomo kept running, as she was more interested in competing against Jun. They kept going for a little while longer until Tomo suddenly collapsed, and when Jun checked in on her, he discovered that she had a high fever. Worried, Jun carried Tomo to the clinic, and when she woke up later in the day, Misuzu and Carol were with her. When she asked what happened, Misuzu explained that after she fainted, Jun finished the race with her on his back, after which he carried her to the clinic. The next moment, Jun walked in, so Misuzu and Carol got up to leave. However, before leaving, the Mistress of Mischief whispered into Tomo's ear, telling her to milk the situation. Now alone, Jun informed Tomo that her mother was on the way to pick her up. Following Misuzu's advice, Tomo requested that Jun give her a piggyback ride to the car, which he did. The following day, Jun dropped by to check on Tomo, and after she thanked him for what he did during the race, she returned his game to him. She said she was returning it because he proved he was stronger than her by finishing the race with her on his back. This caused him to remember the first time he landed a hit on Tomo and how her father had commented on how quickly he caught up to her. Fast forward to when they started middle school, and he first saw her in a skirt, causing him to question all he knew about her since he'd always considered her to be a dude. Tomo complained about his behavior to Misuzu, and the girl told her to ignore him. Later, a boy approached Jun in class to ask if he was dating Tomo, which shocked him, as he'd never even considered that before. When he decided to visit Tomo in her class, he overheard some girls asking her the same question he had been asked earlier. Unlike him, who remained quiet, Tomo denied being in a relationship with him, stating firmly that the idiot didn't even see her as a girl. Her response hurt Jun's fragile ego, so during lunch break, he ignored her when she tried talking to him. After that day, they went an entire year without speaking, and that began to affect her relationship with Misuzu. This was because Tomo usually did all her crazy boyish activities with Jun, but since he wasn't speaking to her, Misuzu was the one suffering from all her antics. Jun, on the other hand, suddenly decided that the best way to cope with his loneliness was to get a girlfriend. Just then, Misuzu showed up and, after teasing him for being a friendless loser, she suggested he make up with Tomo. However, since Jun was a certified idiot, he asked Misuzu to be his girlfriend, to which she said yes. On their first day as a couple, they went on a bike ride to the mountains because Jun wanted to show her the view. It had been an exhausting experience for Misuzu, who made a mental note never to become an athlete. The second day, Jun took her fishing, but just like with the first date, Misuzu found it exhausting. At school the following week, Tomo noticed Misuzu looked like an overworked, sleep-deprived college student, so she asked if she was okay. Overwhelmed by everything, Misuzu admitted to Tomo that she couldn't keep up with her unending energy. Shocked, Tomo dragged her outside where they had a heart-to-heart and patched things up between them. Afterwards, Misuzu approached Jun, intending to dump him, but he shocked her by dumping her first. Later on, Jun approached Tomo to fix things between them, and she punched him for taking so long. She then tearfully demanded to know why he'd ghosted her, and he admitted it was because he was trying to protect her from all those asking about their relationship status. His reason was stupid, and after accepting this fact, he apologized and asked if they could go back to the way they were before. Tomo agreed, but not before she punched him again for being a dim-witted fool. Weeks later, Tomo decided to get a part-time job because she wanted to save up to buy Jun a birthday present. She talked to Misuzu and Carol about it, and Misuzu, worried that the uncultured girl would get into an argument with her employer and beat them silly, decided to join her. Just as Carol also volunteered to join them, Tanabe, who overheard their discussion, offered them a spot at his family's ramen shop. After school, they followed Tanabe to the shop, and he introduced them to his father, who was grateful for the extra pair of hands since his wife was on a trip. Soon, the girls were dressed in their uniforms and began doing the jobs they were assigned to. While Misuzu handled her job like a pro, Tomo and Carol proved they had never worked a day in their lives by failing to do their jobs properly. A little while later, Jun walked in and was just as surprised to see Tomo there as she was to see him. While Misuzu attended to him, Tomo asked Tanabe if Jun was a regular at the shop, and Tanabe confirmed that he came there once a week. This new information annoyed Tomo, and she threatened to beat Tanabe up for failing to mention it to her earlier. Later, while serving Jun, Tomo asked what he thought of her uniform, and he surprised her by completing it, leaving her flushed. After his meal, Jun asked Tomo how long she'd be working at the shop, and she answered that she'd work there until the weekend, so he promised to drop by the next day. 3 days later, the girls' contract at the shop ended, so they collected their paychecks and left. Upon getting outside, they ran into Jun, so Misuzu and Carol left Tomo alone with him. As they walked home, they talked about Tomo's time at the shop, and Jun told her that his ramen tasted better because she served it to him, shocking her momentarily. When Jun's birthday finally came around, Tomo surprised him with matching wristwatches she'd gotten for them. She also gave him a cake and asked if he'd like to have a party at his house later, but he proposed that they have it at her house instead. Later in class, Tomo asked Misuzu for advice on how to appear more womanly to Jun, so the crafty mind suggested that she get him to accidentally touch her melons. Despite her initial refusal, Tomo allowed Misuzu to rope her into an elaborate plan to get Jun to touch her plots. As Jun approached the set stage the stairs, the girls got into position, but things didn't go as planned. This was because after Misuzu pushed Jun, he dodged Tomo and ended up with fists full of Carol's abundant melons. Not surprisingly, Carol wasn't the least bit bothered by this, but Jun was, so he begged Tomo to beat him up, which she happily did. Later, Misuzu contemplated the earlier events and wondered if she'd gone too far this time. She was so distracted by her thoughts that she tripped and fell down the stairs, landing on Tanabe, who happened to be there. Feeling embarrassed, Misuzu thanked Tanabe for being her human cushion and surprised him by asking if she could do anything to repay him. Believing it to be his lucky day, Tanabe asked for her contact information, which she gave him. Later, Carol and Misuzu met, and Misuzu confessed to her that she felt like she was interfering with Tomo and Jun's relationship. Carol told her that she wasn't and tried to hug her, but the anti-touch girl pushed her away. The next day, Tomo noticed Misuzu was late, and Carol informed her that she was taking a sick day to recover from her fall. Later on, the students discussed their upcoming cultural festival, and they decided that their play would be Cinderella. After school, Tomo visited Misuzu, and while they were talking, she pointed out that Misuzu had been avoiding her lately. Misuzu didn't want to talk about it, so Tomo dropped a copy of the Cinderella script, and before leaving, she asked Misuzu not to overthink things. The next day at school, Misuzu learned that she'd been cast as Cinderella while Tomo was Prince Charming. Jun arrived as both girls were trying to come to terms with their roles and started teasing Misuzu, so they ganged up on him. Eventually, the cast began rehearsing for the play, but Misuzu was in a sour mood. Surprisingly, it was Jun who came to talk to her, and he advised her to talk things out with Tomo. but she was determined to keep acting like a tsundere, so she pushed him down. After school, Tomo and Jun left together, but instead of heading home, they stopped by the temple so Jun could help her practice. On the day of the play, Tomo, Misuzu, and Carol's mothers showed up at the school gym to watch the display of joblessness. The play soon began, and surprisingly, it went on without a hitch, as everyone delivered their lines like well-seasoned actors and actresses. The end of the play was accompanied by a standing ovation, and after the curtains closed, Jun invited Tomo to go explore the festival with him. The first place they visited was a maid cafe, where they were served by Mifune and Ogawa, who treated Tomo like a queen and treated Jun the opposite way. Their next stop was the haunted house, where Misaki, who was dressed as a vampire, nearly got punched because he scared Tomo. Later, they played some games which Tomo won, and after that they ate some takoyaki. Meanwhile, their friends were also enjoying the festival, but Misuzu was feeling a bit left out until Carol started including her. She thanked Carol for nominating her to be Cinderella, stating that it helped her smooth things over with Tomo. Soon, the bonfire dance began, and Jun asked Tomo to dance with him. As they swayed to the music, Tomo noted that the way Jun asked her to dance almost seemed like he was hitting on her. Surprisingly, Jun's answer made it seem like he was, causing Tomo to become overwhelmed and run away like a scared little girl. Days later, Jun and Tomo ran into each other outside, and as they began walking, Jun internally noted that since the day of the festival, Tomo had been acting excitedly toward him. When he tried to bring up what happened at the dance, Tomo quickly changed the subject. At school, Carol and Misuzu tried to talk to Tomo about Jun, but the girl dodged the question and walked away, prompting Misuzu to believe that something had happened between them. At the same time, Jun ran into Misaki, and despite their differences, the two began talking. During the conversation, Jun admitted that he liked Tomo, and Misaki advised him to be a man and tell her straight. After speaking with Misaki, Jun met with Misuzu and apologized for using her to try and get over his feelings for Tomo. The next day, Tomo found a challenge letter on her desk, asking her to come to the rooftop. Believing it to be some random challenger looking for a beatdown, she rushed there and was surprised when she found Jun waiting. After she refused to fight him, he brought up her confession and asked if she'd been serious about it. His question annoyed her, and she angrily asked if his stupidity came with a warranty because she couldn't understand why he was so blind that he didn't notice she'd been trying to get his attention. This dumb idiot then confirmed that he'd understood what she'd been trying to say that day, so she punched him. As he lay on the floor, Tomo began regretting her actions, but before she could do anything, Jun suddenly confessed his feelings to her. However, instead of jumping for joy, Tomo panicked and left to look for her friends. After she told them what happened, Carol advised her to accept Jun's confession, but she admitted that she was scared. On the other hand, Misuzu, overcome by guilt, apologized to Tomo for suggesting that she act more girly toward Jun since she was perfect as she was. Once they had settled things between them, Tomo rushed off to meet with Jun and apologized for running away before. They then returned to the spot where she first confessed, and Jun properly confessed his feelings for her there. Despite being happy that Jun felt the same way about her, Tomo pointed out that if they became a couple, they would no longer be besto friendos. Jun argued that they would, as them being a couple didn't stop them from continuing to be the way they were. To prove it, he challenged Tomo to a race up the temple stairs, and she won, but he just laughed and said their relationship would never change. Tomo then confessed her feelings for Jun, who then comically rolled down the shrine stairs. Worried, Tomo rushed to check on him and found him smiling like a fool as he fist-pumped the air while screaming happily. Weeks later, while hanging out with Carol and Misuzu, Tomo complained to them about how much Jun had changed since they confessed their feelings for each other. She said the boy hadn't even tried to spice things up between them, and it was becoming frustrating. This made Misuzu suggest that Tomo grab the bull by the horns and kiss Jun, but Tomo got all shy and said she couldn't do such a thing. Misuzu told her to stop acting like a prude and said she could invite him to watch a romantic movie to set the mood. This idea sounded nice to Tomo, so she agreed to run with it, hoping it would help her get her first kiss. That weekend, Tomo and Jun met up for their date, and Tomo's appearance made Jun blush. However, when he got his senses back, he complimented her, causing her to also blush. The two then went to see the movie, and Tomo remembered Misuzu's suggestion that she kiss Jun during it. However, when the time came for Tomo to kiss Jun, she was too flustered from the kiss scene in the movie and chickened out. On the other hand, Jun seemed to enjoy the movie, and after the movie, he admitted he wasn't into romance movies, as he felt they were cringe and he'd never relate to them. However, he said his opinion had changed now that he'd fallen in love with her, making Tomo feel like she was on top of the world. They then exchanged gifts, with Jun giving Tomo a pair of earrings and Tomo giving him a handmade muffler. Later, as they walked home together, Tomo insisted on going to Jun's place since she still wanted to complete her mission of kissing him. When they arrived, things between them became awkward, and the tension was thicker than your girl because neither of them was brave enough to make a move. Eventually, Tomo got frustrated and blurted out that all she'd been thinking about doing all night was tongue wrestling him and hopefully going to third base. Her admission shocked Jun, leaving him flustered, but he recovered and told her that even though he wanted to kiss her, he couldn't because they weren't officially dating yet, and he wanted their first kiss to be special. He then revealed that he'd gone to ask for her parents' blessing, but her father had refused and said the only way he'd let him date her was if he defeated him in a fight. Tomo became angry after hearing this and immediately stormed off to confront her muscle-brained father. When she got home, she met him discussing the issue with her mother, but she didn't care and lashed out at her father. After all the yelling and arguments, Tomo told him that she hated him and walked away, leaving the man speechless. The following day, Jun dropped by Timo's house to see her, but her mother informed him that Tomo didn't want to see anyone. She then advised him to find her husband and fight him, hinting at the fact that he would win since the man was upset. However, Jun refused, as he wasn't prepared. At school later, Jun and Tomo talked about her father's challenge, and she expressed her anger at the fact that he had kept it from her. Jun admitted that it had been a lifelong dream of his to defeat her father, so she punched him for being a fool. Afterwards, in class, Tomo was confronted by Misuzu and Carol for ignoring them for the past 2 weeks, so she took them to the rooftop and explained her situation. After school, Jun announced to Tomo that he would accept her father's challenge. He then rushed off to meet the man at the dojo, and while Tomo remained at school because of her club activity. While at the club, she talked to Misaki about Tomo's crazy plan to fight her father, and Misaki admitted that he knew about it. However, he advised Tomo not to be stubborn and suggested that she go home to support Jun. Following his suggestion, Tomo rushed out, ignoring Carol and Misuzu on the way. When she arrived at the dojo, she found Jun struggling for his life, and immediately declared that she'd fight in his place. Jun refused to accept this and told her that he could still fight even though he looked like he would pass out soon. Having no choice, Tomo backed off, but said she would tap in if she saw that he couldn't continue. Fueled by the power of love, Jun approached Tomo's father and requested another round. As they fought, Tomo noticed something was off about the man and soon realized that he was purposely leaving himself open for an attack. Eventually, he figured out that the man was trying to test his courage and will to protect Tomo and not his strength, as he believed. Determined to prove that he was up to the task, Jun launched himself at the man and punched him. Despite Jun's clear victory, Tomo's father still refused to accept his defeat, so his wife stepped in and talked him out of being a stubborn goat. After he admitted his defeat, Jun and Tomo went outside, and Jun officially asked Tomo to be his girlfriend. Tomo was upset because she had wanted to be the one to ask him out, but Jun told her that it was his duty as the guy, so the next moment, she kissed him since she didn't want him to steal her thunder this time. Would you rather be stuck in a room with Tomo for an hour or date Misuzu? If you've watched up to this point and loved the video, you can check out the next video. See you guys in the next video.